What if the ache in your heart isn't about them, but about the parts of you still waiting to be chosen? What if every sleepless night spent wondering why they won't text back, every careful analysis of their social media activity, every moment you've spent crafting the perfect message only to delete it? What if none of it was really about them at all? This isn't just about letting someone go. It's about finally coming home to yourself. It's about recognizing that the person you've been chasing in the mirror of another's validation has been waiting for you all along, patient and unwavering in the depths of your own heart. If you've been chasing love that never turns back, if you've been pouring your energy into someone who receives it like a desert receives rain, grateful for a moment, then returning to its natural state of drought, this is your moment to stop. To remember what real alignment feels like. To remember that love, true love, doesn't require you to shrink, perform, or beg. Stay with me, because what we're about to explore together might just change everything. There's a certain kind of silence, the kind that echoes after you've poured yourself into someone who never truly opened the door. It's not the comfortable silence of contentment, nor the peaceful quiet of solitude. It's the hollow echo of words spoken into a void, of love offered to hands that never quite reach back. It's a quiet loneliness, not because you're alone, but because you've abandoned yourself in pursuit of someone else's presence. You've become a ghost in your own life, haunting the spaces between their responses, existing in the gaps of their attention. Clara knows this silence intimately. She's been carrying it for months now, like a stone in her chest that grows heavier with each passing day. Ever since Leo became the center of her emotional universe, a universe where she orbits around his sporadic attention like a planet desperate for the sun's warmth, willing to endure long seasons of darkness for just a few moments of light. Every morning she wakes to the immediate impulse to check her phone, her heart performing a small, hopeful leap that is almost always followed by the familiar descent of disappointment. The green dot next to his name on social media becomes the source of both hope and torment. He's online. He's seen her message. Yet the response doesn't come. When it does arrive, days or weeks later, it's brief, casual, leaving her analyzing every word for hidden meaning like an archaeologist examining ancient texts. "Hey, how's it going?" becomes a puzzle to solve. Does the casual tone mean he's trying to play it cool but actually cares? Or does it mean exactly what it says, a polite but distant check-in from someone who has already moved on emotionally? Clara screenshots these conversations, not out of joy, but out of a desperate need to study them later, to find clues about when things shifted. She remembers when his messages used to come with enthusiasm, when he would double text, when he seemed genuinely excited to hear from her. Now she finds herself reverse engineering their relationship, trying to pinpoint the exact moment when his interest began to wane, as if identifying the turning point might give her the power to somehow undo it. We chase, not because we're desperate, but because somewhere deep down, we believe love must be earned. We've been conditioned to think that affection is a reward for good behavior, that connection is something we must prove ourselves worthy of receiving, that if we become enough patient, enough understanding, enough accommodating, enough interesting, enough attractive, enough available, they'll finally choose us. We operate under the illusion that love is a transaction, that if we just invest enough emotional currency, we'll eventually receive the return we're seeking. But love that must be chased is not love at all. It's a performance, a negotiation, a desperate attempt to convince someone of our worth when the very fact that we need to convince them reveals the fundamental misalignment. So what is this chase really about? What drives us to keep running towards those who keep walking away? It's not them. It's not about their inability to see our worth or their failure to recognize a good thing when they have it. It's your inner child hoping to rewrite a story where they were once left behind, hoping to finally get the love that felt so conditional, so elusive, so dependent on being perfect. It's your shadow hoping someone else will validate the parts of you you've never been able to hold, the parts that learned early that acceptance was something to be earned rather than something to be freely given. This exploration is not about blame. It's not about making them wrong or making yourself wrong. It's about awakening. It's about understanding the deeper currents that drive these patterns so you can finally break free from them. Because the moment you stop running after those who don't choose you, you begin walking toward the version of you that always has. The version that has been waiting patiently for you to remember your own worth, your own completeness, your own inherent lovability. Let's descend together. Let's explore the depths of this pattern with curiosity rather than judgment. Let's remember the art of no longer begging for breadcrumbs and choosing instead to feast on your own worth, to nourish yourself with the love you've been so desperately trying to find in someone else's approval. You see them online. You replay the conversation in your mind for the 100th time. You craft texts and then delete them, the digital equivalent of writing letters you'll never send. Your phone becomes both your best friend and your worst enemy, simultaneously holding the potential for connection and the weight of disappointment. Clara refreshes Leo's social media stories compulsively, watching him live a full life that rarely includes acknowledgement of her existence. She sees him at dinner with friends, laughing at inside jokes she's not part of. She watches him post about his day, his thoughts, his experiences, and she feels like a voyeur peering into a life she desperately wants to be part of, but has no invitation to enter. She screenshots old conversations from better days, rereading them like sacred texts, searching for clues about when things shifted, trying to decode the exact moment when his warmth turned to coolness. The messages she types and deletes could fill novels, desperate attempts to sound casual while her heart pounds with the fear of saying the wrong thing. She writes, "Hey, just thinking about you," then deletes it thinking it sounds too eager. She tries, "Hope you're having a good week," but deletes that too, worried it sounds too generic. She settles on something that feels safe, but immediately regrets it, wondering if she should have been more direct, more playful, more mysterious. The perfect message becomes an impossible puzzle with no solution. Her friends begin to worry. They watch her check her phone during dinner, see her distracted during conversations, notice how her mood shifts dramatically based on whether Leo has been in contact. They gently suggest that maybe she should give him some space, maybe focus on other things, but Clara feels like they don't understand. How can she explain that Leo has become the barometer by which she measures her own worth? How can she articulate that his silence feels like a judgment, his distance like a verdict? All because your nervous system is wired to seek connection, even if it's one-sided, even if it costs your peace, even if it's slowly eroding your sense of self. Your brain doesn't distinguish between healthy and unhealthy attachment. It only knows that this person has become significant, and significance demands attention, even when that attention becomes a source of suffering. But beneath the longing lies a question that cuts deeper than all the surface-level wondering. Why do I keep wanting what keeps hurting me? Why do I keep returning to this well that never seems to hold water? Why do I keep investing in a stock that never pays dividends? That question is your starting point. It's the thread that, when pulled, begins to unravel the entire pattern. Because chasing people who don't choose you isn't about desire, it's about pattern. It's about unconscious programming running in the background of your psyche, directing your actions toward familiar forms of suffering because somewhere deep down, familiar feels safer than unknown, even when familiar is painful. Somewhere along the way, you were taught that love is something to be earned. Not explicitly, perhaps, but through the subtle language of conditional acceptance that speaks louder than words. You saw people stay only when you performed, pleased, or proved your value. You learned that affection was a reward for good behavior, rather than a birthright of simply existing. For Clara, the pattern runs deeper than Leo, stretching back through years of relationships that followed the same blueprint. It echoes back to childhood dinners where her father's approval came only with perfect grades, where his attention was reserved for achievements rather than offered freely for who she was. She learned early that love was a reward for good behavior, not a birthright of simply existing. Her mother's affection, while more available, came with its own conditions. She had to be the easy child who never caused trouble, never made waves, never needed too much. Clara remembers being 8 years old, desperate for her father's attention while he read the newspaper. She would perform little dances, tell him jokes, show him drawings she'd made, each attempt met with distracted acknowledgement at best. But occasionally, when she brought home a perfect test score or won a school competition, she would receive his full attention, his genuine pride, his complete presence. These moments were intoxicating, and she learned to chase them, to shape herself into the kind of daughter who might earn them more frequently. The pattern continued through her teenage years, where she dated boys who were emotionally unavailable, interpreting their distance as a challenge to overcome, rather than information about their capacity for connection. She became expert at reading between the lines, at finding meaning in minimal effort, at convincing herself that persistence would eventually be rewarded with love. You learned that silence meant danger, that rejection meant you needed to do more, be more, try harder, love bigger. Silence became an emergency that required immediate action. Distance became a problem that demanded a solution. You developed hypervigilance around signs of withdrawal, always scanning for evidence that love might be slipping away, always ready to spring into action to prevent abandonment. So when someone becomes distant or cold, you don't step back to evaluate whether this is a person capable of the kind of connection you're seeking. You lean in. You interpret their unavailability as a challenge rather than information about their capacity or interest. Not because you love them, but because your inner child is screaming, "This time, let's not be abandoned. This time, let's prove we're worthy. This time, let's rewrite the story so it has a different ending." Your adult self gets hijacked by this younger part who is still trying to earn love from people who were never really available to give it freely. This is not your fault. This is your programming. These patterns were etched into your nervous system before you had the awareness to choose differently, before you understood that love could be freely given and received without conditions, without performance, without the exhausting work of constantly proving your worth. And awareness is the beginning of reprogramming. The moment you can see the pattern clearly, without judgment, but with compassion for the younger self who developed these strategies for survival, you begin to have choice about whether to continue following the same blueprint. Your brain, magnificent as it is, cannot distinguish between the anticipation of a text message and the anticipation of hitting the jackpot on a slot machine. This is called intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive schedule of reward known to psychology. When Leo responds unpredictably, sometimes after hours, sometimes after days, sometimes not at all, your brain releases dopamine, not when he responds, but in the waiting. The anticipation itself becomes the drug. Casinos understand this principle intimately. They know that consistent rewards create quick satisfaction, but little addiction, while unpredictable rewards create an insatiable hunger for the next hit. The slot machine doesn't pay out every time, or even most of the time, but the possibility that this time might be different keeps people pulling the lever long after logic would suggest they walk away. Clara's relationship with Leo follows this exact pattern. His inconsistent responses, sometimes warm and engaging, sometimes cold and distant, sometimes absent entirely, create the perfect conditions for psychological addiction. Her brain releases dopamine every time she reaches for her phone to check for messages, every time she sees his name appear, every time she anticipates a response. She becomes addicted to the hope, not the person. She becomes hooked on the possibility of connection rather than the reality of it. Research in neuroscience reveals something profound about your pain. When scientists scan the brains of people experiencing social rejection, the same regions light up as when someone touches a hot stove. The anterior cingulate cortex and right ventral prefrontal cortex, areas associated with physical pain, become active during emotional rejection. Your heartbreak isn't dramatic or excessive, it's literal. Your brain processes emotional pain as physical injury, which is why rejection feels like a wound that won't heal, why it creates such an urgency for resolution. This neurological reality explains why Clara feels physically sick when Leo doesn't respond, why her chest tightens when she sees him online but not replying to her message, why the silence creates such intense discomfort that any response, even a lukewarm one, feels like relief. Her brain is literally interpreting his unavailability as a threat to her well-being, triggering fight or flight responses that make rational thought nearly impossible. This connects to what psychologists call anxious attachment, a style of connecting that often forms when early caregivers were inconsistent in their availability. If love felt unpredictable in childhood, if safety required constant vigilance about the emotional state of important adults, your nervous system learned to be hypervigilant, always scanning for signs of abandonment, always working to prevent the inevitable loss that felt certain to come. People with anxious attachment often experience relationships as a constant source of anxiety rather than comfort. They tend to interpret neutral behaviors as signs of rejection, to catastrophize small conflicts, to need frequent reassurance that the relationship is secure. They're not being dramatic or needy. They're operating from a nervous system that learned early that love was fragile and required constant maintenance to preserve. Understanding this doesn't minimize your experience. It validates it completely. It explains why your reactions feel so intense, so urgent, so necessary. Your nervous system is doing exactly what it was programmed to do, trying to maintain connection at all costs, because to the deepest parts of your brain, disconnection feels like death. What if they're not rejecting you? What if the story you've been telling yourself about their silence, their distance, their mixed signals is not actually about your worth at all? What if they're simply not your mirror, not your match, not your medicine? What if their unavailability isn't a challenge for you to overcome, but information for you to receive? Clara's awakening came on a Tuesday evening, scrolling through photos of Leo at a party she wasn't invited to. She noticed him laughing with friends, looking relaxed and happy, and instead of the usual spiral of "what did I do wrong?" or "why wasn't I included?", a different thought emerged. What if this isn't about me at all? What if Leo's distance wasn't a judgment of her worth, but simply a reflection of his own capacity, his own wounds, his own relationship with intimacy and vulnerability? For the first time, she considered that his pulling away might not be evidence of her inadequacy, but evidence of his own limitations. Maybe he was dealing with his own fears about closeness. Maybe he had his own patterns of running when things started to feel too real. Maybe his inconsistent communication wasn't a test for her to pass, but a sign that he wasn't in a place to offer the kind of consistent, present love she was seeking. This shift in perspective didn't happen overnight. It came in waves, moments of clarity followed by returns to the old pattern of self-blame. But gradually, Clara began to see that she had been making Leo's behavior all about her when it might have had very little to do with her at all. She began to understand that his emotional unavailability was not a verdict on her lovability, but a statement about his own capacity for connection. Every time you chase someone who doesn't choose you, you send a message to your subconscious: I am only worthy if they say I am. My value is determined by their attention. My lovability is contingent on their approval. You outsource your sense of self to someone who has shown you through their actions that they're not capable of holding that responsibility. But your worth was never a vote. It was never subject to someone else's opinion or dependent on their recognition. It was a truth, unshakable, immutable, present from the moment you drew your first breath and unchanging regardless of who sees it or acknowledges it. When you stop begging to be seen, you begin seeing yourself. You start honoring your own yes, your own intuition, your own standards, your own energy. You begin to trust your own assessment of your worth rather than seeking it in the mirror of someone else's attention. And that is where the healing begins, not in finally getting them to choose you, but in choosing yourself so completely that their choice becomes irrelevant to your sense of wholeness. The first act of self-love is not a spa day. It's not buying yourself flowers or treating yourself to something special, though these gestures can be meaningful. The first act of self-love is a boundary. It's a gentle yet unwavering no more. No more chasing texts that don't come. No more over-explaining your emotions to someone who doesn't ask to understand them. No more shrinking just to fit inside their absence. No more making yourself available for someone who makes you an option. Clara began small, with changes that felt manageable but represented massive shifts in her relationship with herself. She turned off read receipts, removing the anxiety of knowing when Leo had seen her messages without responding. She stopped keeping her Saturday nights available just in case Leo decided to reach out with last-minute plans. She unfollowed his social media, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation, recognizing that watching his life from a distance was keeping her trapped in a fantasy rather than allowing her to live her own reality. When friends asked about him, she practiced saying, "We're not in contact anymore,"
without the lengthy explanation that used to follow, without the justifications or the hope-filled updates about their last interaction. She stopped analyzing his every move with her friends, stopped seeking their reassurance that he might still come around, stopped using their perspectives to fuel her own fantasy. The process wasn't linear. Some days she found herself slipping back into old patterns, checking his social media or crafting messages she knew she shouldn't send. But each time she caught herself, she practiced the same gentle redirection. This is not serving me. This is not love. This is not what I want to be doing with my precious energy. You are not too much. Your desire for consistent communication, for emotional availability, for someone who chooses you as clearly as you choose them, these are not excessive demands. They are basic requirements for healthy connection. They are too unavailable, too defended, too committed to keeping you at arm's length to provide what you're seeking. And that is not a judgment of their character. It is an observation. It is an alignment check. It is information about compatibility that has nothing to do with worth, yours or theirs, and everything to do with readiness, capacity, and timing. Because the right souls will never make you chase. They will walk beside you, not ahead, requiring you to run to catch up, not behind, forcing you to slow down and wait. Beside, they will match your energy, meet your effort, reciprocate your interest. The right connection will feel like recognition, not pursuit. Your voice is your home. Warm, slow, emotionally attuned. Remember Anthony Hopkins' words, "Let go of the people who are not prepared to love you." This is the hardest thing you'll ever have to do, and it will also be the most important thing you ever do. The hardest thing isn't a single moment of dramatic goodbye. It's not the grand gesture of deleting their number or having a final conversation where you eloquently explain why you're walking away. The hardest thing is the collection of small, daily, painful choices. The choice not to check their social media when your fingers itch for information. The choice to sit with the void instead of filling it with fantasy. The choice to feel the loneliness instead of numbing it with false hope. It's choosing to stay present with the discomfort of not knowing, rather than creating stories that keep you connected to someone who has shown you they're not available for connection. It's choosing to trust your experience rather than their words, to believe their actions rather than their potential. For Clara, it meant choosing to go to bed without checking her phone one more time to see if Leo had messaged her. It meant choosing to make plans without leaving room for the possibility that he might want to see her. It meant choosing to invest in friendships with people who were consistently available, rather than pouring her energy into someone who offered only intermittent reinforcement. Each small no to them becomes a yes to yourself. Each moment you resist the urge to chase becomes a moment you choose your own peace. Each time you redirect your energy towards your own life instead of towards someone who doesn't reciprocate, you reclaim a piece of your power. The importance of this choice cannot be overstated. When you stop chasing people who don't choose you, you free up enormous amounts of energy that can be redirected toward people and pursuits that actually nourish you. You create space for genuine connections to emerge. You model for yourself what it looks like to value your own time and attention. So start reclaiming your life, one small choice at a time. Unfollow in silence. Don't announce your exit or make it a dramatic production. Just choose peace over proximity. Choose alignment over attention. Choose soul resonance over shallow validation. Choose your own well-being over the fantasy of what could be. Self-reclamation is not a destination, but a practice. It's a daily choice to prioritize your own emotional well-being over the fantasy of being chosen by someone who has shown you they're not available to choose you fully. Clara began incorporating small rituals into her day that anchored her back to herself. She started each morning by writing 3 things she was grateful for, focusing on aspects of her life that had nothing to do with Leo or a romantic relationship. She began taking walks without her phone, allowing herself to be present with her surroundings rather than constantly available for communication that might never come.
She rediscovered interests that had fallen by the wayside during her months of focusing on Leo. She signed up for a pottery class she'd been considering for years, started reading fiction again, reached out to friends she'd neglected while pouring all her social energy into analyzing her relationship with someone who wasn't actually in relationship with her. The practice also involved learning to sit with difficult emotions without immediately seeking to fix them through connection with Leo. When loneliness arose, instead of reaching out to him, she learned to reach out to herself. She would make herself tea, take a bath, call a friend who was actually available for conversation, or simply sit with the feeling until it passed. This wasn't about becoming cold or closed off. It was about learning to be her own first responder to emotional distress, instead of automatically turning to someone who had proven unable or unwilling to provide comfort. Your version of you who no longer chases isn't bitter. They haven't become cynical about love or closed off to connection. They are free. Free in a way that allows them to move through the world with an inner stability that doesn't depend on external validation. Free to choose relationships that feel like mirrors, not mazes. Free to engage with people who reflect your energy back to you, rather than absorbing it without reciprocation. Free to dance in your own rhythm without waiting for someone to clap, to validate, to approve. 6 months later, Clara receives a message from Leo. "Hey stranger, thinking of you. How have you been?" The old Clara would have felt her heart race, would have immediately begun crafting the perfect response, would have interpreted this as a sign that her waiting and hoping had finally paid off. She would have seen it as validation that she was right to hold on to hope, evidence that he did care after all. But this Clara reads it with the same emotional temperature as a weather report. Interesting information, but nothing that changes her internal climate. She feels a small flutter of the old familiar feeling, but it passes quickly, replaced by a deep sense of her own solidity, her own completeness. She responds kindly, but briefly. "Hi, Leo. I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking. Hope you're well too." She doesn't ask questions that might extend the conversation. She doesn't offer updates that might give him an opening to re-engage. She responds from a place of genuine politeness, rather than hidden agenda. Then, she continues with her evening. She's planning a solo trip to Italy, something she'd postponed months, hoping Leo might want to travel together. She's been dating someone new, someone who texts back within hours, who makes plans and keeps them, who shows interest that matches her own. The contrast is startling. Where connection with Leo felt like work, connection with this new person feels like ease. She realizes that what she thought was love for Leo was actually attachment to the idea of finally earning love from someone who withheld it. The relief she feels in this new connection, the simple pleasure of being chosen clearly and consistently, shows her what she had been missing. Free to look in the mirror and say, "I do not need to earn love. I am love. I am worthy of love not because of what I do or how I perform, but because of who I am. I am worthy of love that is freely given, consistently offered, and joyfully received." So today, stop chasing them. Not because they're bad people, not because you failed to be enough, not because love is impossible or everyone is unavailable, but because your soul deserves more. More honesty, more consistency, more presence, more yes, more connection that feels like recognition rather than pursuit. And the only way to find that is to stop running toward those who keep walking away, to stop pouring your energy into relationships that leave you feeling drained rather than filled, to stop accepting crumbs when you deserve the whole feast. You are not a beggar of love. You are not someone who should have to convince another person of your worth. You are not meant to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's limited capacity for connection. You are the embodiment of love itself. You are worthy of love that celebrates you rather than tolerates you, that chooses you clearly rather than keeps you guessing, that feels like coming home rather than like pleasing a stranger. Walk accordingly. Move through the world with the confidence of someone who knows their own worth, who trusts their own experience, who refuses to settle for connections that require them to abandon themselves. The ones who are meant for you won't make you question your worth. They won't leave you analyzing their words for hidden meaning or crafting careful responses designed to maintain their interest. They'll feel like peace, not performance, like recognition, not pursuit, like coming home, not like trying to earn a place at someone else's table. So let them go. Let go of the people who are not prepared to love you fully, consistently, joyfully, with grace, with finality, with a soft exhale that releases not just them, but the part of you that believed you needed to earn love instead of simply receiving it. And let yourself return to the sanctuary of your own being. Return to the place inside you that has always known your worth, that has never needed external validation to confirm your lovability, that has been waiting patiently for you to remember what you've always been, complete, whole, worthy of love exactly as you are. Because when you stop chasing, you finally become the one worth being found. When you stop running toward those who walk away, you become available for those who are walking toward you. When you stop begging for crumbs, you make space at your table for those who come bearing their own feast. Clara learned this truth, and so can you. The love you're seeking isn't hiding in someone else's approval. It's waiting in the gentle acceptance of who you already are. It's in the daily choice to treat yourself with the same tenderness you've been offering to someone who couldn't receive it. It's in the recognition that you are not too much for the right person, and the right person is not too little for you. The love you're seeking has been here all along, waiting for you to stop looking outside yourself long enough to recognize it. It's been in every sunrise you've witnessed, every breath you've taken, every moment you've chosen to keep going despite the pain. It's been in your resilience, your capacity for hope, your willingness to keep your heart open even when it's been broken. You are already loved, completely, unconditionally, by the very force that brought you into being. Everything else is just extra. Everything else is just a beautiful addition to the love that you already are. Remember this, trust this, come home to this, and watch how everything changes when you finally choose yourself first.
Subscribe for more journeys of awakening. If this video touched something deep within you, if you recognized your own story in Clara's words, if you felt that relief of finally being seen in your most intimate patterns, you are not alone in this journey. This channel is a sanctuary for awakening souls, a sacred space where we explore the most delicate territories of the human heart, where vulnerability meets wisdom, where pain transforms into power, where you learn to come home to yourself. Here, we dive into the depths of the emotional patterns that keep us trapped. We explore the science behind our attachments, the poetry of inner healing, the whispers of the soul that guide us back to our essential truth. If you're ready to understand the unconscious patterns that govern your love choices, learn the language of your nervous system and how to reprogram it for self-love, discover how to transform abandonment wounds into portals of empowerment, explore shadow work with compassion and depth, then hit that bell and subscribe, because you deserve content that sees you completely.